Hello, everybody. Welcome to our week 4 free response recap. Now, like usual, if you haven't done these questions yet, do the questions first before you come and watch this. We'll give you the explanation here, but you're going to get a lot out of trying them and then looking at seeing what you're missing out on as opposed to, just seeing what the answer is. All right. Now, we're going to do this a little different this week. I'm going to actually type these in front of you here. What I want to try to do is model my thinking process as I'm going through one of these types of questions, as opposed to maybe show it to you in a more linear fashion, like here's just what the answer is. I was surprised a little bit at how much we struggled with these this week. I think some of that had to do with understanding the question a little bit. But what I want to do, especially here, is show you that how I can kind of put my answer together without understanding the whole thing and still get some points for it. Okay, so let's start going. I'm on free response FRQ number 3. Okay, here is my time left ticking, so I'm on the clock, I guess, just like you guys are here. And this one talks about the idea of a sparse array. Basically, let's scroll down here and look at their example. Now, I gave comments to a few students that out of your 25 to 30 minutes to do a question, if you spend 10 to 15 minutes just really understanding what that question is, there's nothing wrong with that. The actual answer is going to be 10 to 15 lines of code, which if you get it, it's not going to take 20 minutes to type up. Okay, so you're better off taking your time early, making sure you really understand that question before you go into it. So there's nothing wrong with reading that question multiple times. Okay, but basically, here's the idea here. We have a sparse array. A sparse array is an array where most of the elements are empty or zero. This is a bad thing. So for example, if I have this 2D array where I only am storing 4 different things, if I store this as a 2D array, I'm wasting memory for each of these 0 spaces. And it would be a lot less memory just to store only the spaces in that array that have something to them. So in other words, what this is saying to do is rather than store a sparse array in an actual 2D array with just a bunch of empty spaces, just store it in an array list, keeping track of where those spaces will be filled. Okay, kind of a fun thing about these exams is this is a real computer science thing. It is something that computer scientists do to save memory. So make sure you understand this question. With this one, we're going to take an empty 2D array and write it as a sparse array to save memory. Okay, that's going to involve 2 things. Number one, run the sparse array entry object, which basically stores a row, a column, and the value that goes there. Okay, so 3 pieces of information that gets stored. It has a pretty simple constructor where you plug in the row, the column, and the value. And then there's a get row, get column, get value method for you for those. Okay, so again, rather than having this whole array here, we'll store sparse array objects, which basically save all the same information, just ignoring all the zeros. Okay, and then we also have the sparse array class, okay, which stores the number of rows, the number of columns, and then the big thing here is this array list of sparse array entry objects called entries. Okay, this is going to be the key for this class. This is going to be what stores all those different data points for us. We've got a constructor that basically just initializes that array. We have a get number of rows, get number of columns. A little tricky because these both didn't get actually used in the solutions. And then the 2 methods we want to write in part A is a get value at and a remove column method. Let's start talking about those. We'll scroll down to part A. Write the sparse array method get value at. Okay, the method returns the value of the sparse array at a given row and column in the sparse array. If the list entries contains an entry with a specific row and column, the value is associated, blah, 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 and it should return a 0 if we can't find it. Okay, so basically what I want to do here is I want to, let's see here, so we got public int get value at all right, so basically what I want to do with this method is plug in the row and the column, and I want to figure out what values at that row and column. Okay, what am I looking through? I'm looking through this array list of entries for that value. So essentially all I'm going to do here is loop from the first index to I less than entries dot size. So I'm going to loop through that entire array and see if I can find one with that row and column. Okay, now notice I'm tabbing here. Okay, make sure you do that on the actual exam. If things look better, you'll get more credit for it. Okay, so as I go through that entries, I'm going to say if what is at entries at I, entries, so dot get I, so the ith entry, and then I need to get the row from that, dot get row, and that's coming from my sparse array entry objects. Okay, that's one of their objects. And if that's equal to the row parameter I plugged in, okay, and entries dot get I dot get column equals the column I plugged in. So if those are both true, I found the entry with this row with this column. So what I'm going to do then is just return the value for that. So that'd be entries dot get I dot get value. And that is my loop. Now I'm just going to go and check and make sure I'm using those methods correctly here. So that will be one of the issues with this exam is you need to scroll. That's why you're going to want two separate spots to work with here. Yep, it's get row, get column, get value from that sparse array entries. Now if you spell those wrong, not a big deal. Your code doesn't need to actually be able to compile. It just needs to be able to tell what you mean. Okay, so in other words, if I go through all the way through entries and I find an entry with the row, with the column, I want to return the value at that column. Okay, otherwise, I want to return 0. And that's going to happen outside of this loop. Okay, basically I want to loop through everything, and if I don't find something, if I never hit this return statement, I know the return 0 is going to get hit at the end here. Issue I saw with students is a few answers said else return 0 within the loop. Now I don't want to do that because what's going to happen there is if I don't find the row and column on my first entry, I'm not going to run this. I'm going to return 0 right away, which isn't what I want. It could be on a previous entry. Okay, so typically when you're doing like a default return value of 0 or -1, do that after the loop is all said and done. So we'll get rid of that, and I think this will be good. Again, there might be some typos in here. I might have spelled something wrong. Looks like I spelled entries wrong. Doesn't matter. Okay, I'm not going to lose points for misspelling something unless it's a clear I mixed something up, but in this case it's not. All right, B. Okay, write the sparse array method remove column. Okay, after removing a specified column from the sparse array, all entries in the entries with a column index matching column are removed. Okay, so in this example, basically, if I'm removing column 1, I want to get rid of these for my entry. Okay, all entries in columns with indexes greater than column are replaced with ones that are one lower, and then the number of columns is adjusted to reflect the column removed. Okay, and so yep, essentially if I call remove column 1, I'm going to take anything out of this list that has the column 1. Anything with a column less than 1 is going to stay the same. Anything with a column bigger is going to be one smaller. Okay, so let's do that here. And actual test time, I don't think you need to actually type the method header. That's already given to you. but I think it looks weird if I don't do that, so that's why I'm going to do that here. Okay. Now, I guess first thing right off the bat, here's kind of a simple point some students missed, is the number of columns in the sparse array is adjusted to reflect the column removed. This is a little bit of a weird spot as I scroll up. Remember, there are two variables for num columns and num rows. It doesn't tell us how to set those actually, but I'm going to get a point on this one just for saying I forget how I spelled that. Numcalls minus minus for just counting that down. Make sure you're not losing simple points like that. Okay, I do see a lot of students submit. They had like 25 minutes to work on this problem. They submitted after 17 minutes and they missed this point. Make sure you're checking those things off. Make sure you're getting all that stuff. Wouldn't be a bad idea to make a list on the side of the checkpoints you need to hit. Okay, then what I need to do is loop through entries once again. So for int I equals 0, I less than entries dot size. Okay, dot size for getting the size of a array list, and then I plus plus. Okay, I could also do this with a while loop, but like I predicted, most students attempted with a for loop. I guess that's what I do. That's what I'd recommend. Okay, if I come across a value that has column that is equal to column, that's column is equal to column. So if entries dot get dot get column is equal to the parameter column. It's kind of like I did with the previous problem. If I come across one with the same column, what I want to do is I want to remove that. And remember, to remove something from an array list, we've seen this 2 weeks in a row now. I want to remove whatever's in entries at I. I'm making just spelling mistakes all over the place here. Okay, so I want to remove it. Now, reminder, if you're using a for loop to remove something, you want to go I minus minus right after that. Why do I want to do that? Well, if I scroll up here and let's say that I is 0, 1, 2, I found a column that something that I want to remove because column equals 1. If I remove this, what was at index 3 is now at index 2. When my loop counter goes up, I move on to the next one and I'd skip this, I wouldn't catch this one here. Okay, so moral of the story, if you are removing items from a array list using a for loop, you've got to do that I minus minus. Okay, so if it's the same column, we'll say remove, or else I need another if statement because I need to deal with that element if it is a column that's higher than the column that I'm removing. So let's say if entries dot get I dot get call is greater than column, I want to reassign it. Now, the trick with this is I'm going to want to look at my array list class. And let's see here. It doesn't actually give me a method to actually reassign things. So basically, we're going to have to do this from scratch. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to say entries dot set. Okay, we've seen this 2 weeks in a row now. Jeez, let's spell good. Set I, comma 2. What do I want to set it to? Well, there's a few ways I could do this. I could create that sparse array entry object ahead of time, or I could just create it right in here. I'm just going to create it here. I'm going to say new sparse array entry object. And then how do I create a sparse array entry object? Let's scroll up. The constructor needs a row, a column, and a value. Maybe I don't want to type this all in one line of code, but yeah, we'll do it anyways. This is looking maybe a little bad right now, but that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to model thinking through these for you. Maybe it's painful bad idea. Maybe it's a good idea. We'll see. What I need to do is I need to plug in the row, column, and value. So I suppose all I need to do is take entries dot get I dot get value. Sorry, get row. All right, that's going to be the row for my new entry that I'm creating, just with the same row as what's at I. Entries dot get I dot get call -1. Okay, so in other words, I'm going to plug in the column of my current one less. Okay, one less than the column. And then same thing, entries dot get I dot get value, because I want to have the same value. So same row, same value, one less than. All right, for my column. Okay, otherwise I suppose what I could do is I could take all this, maybe this is the better way to do it. We'll cut that out. We'll make a new line of code. So we're going to make a new sparse array entry object called sparse, and that's going to be equal to basically what I just copy paste there. I'm going to make a new object with that constructor, and then I'm going to pass in sparse here. Maybe that makes it look a little nicer. Either way, we get the same thing. I'm putting semicolons in that I don't need. All right, and that should be good. Now, I need the else if here, because if it isn't greater than, I just want to leave it alone. Okay, so this question is testing you on when to use if, when else if, when do you leave things alone. Okay, so that's it for this question here. Let's take a look at my timer and see how I'm doing. Okay, I had 25 minutes. I'm actually going to have 30 minutes on the actual exam. Okay, I started a little late. It's been about less than 20. I read through the whole thing. I explained it in detail, and I still had plenty of time. I guess the big thing I want to get across here is don't race through your reading the question. You've got time to type the code. Even in this longer one, how many lines of code did I type? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 lines of code, and about half of them were just braces. Okay, so really there's no reason to race through the reading of the question so you can get to a pretty simple method. All right, so I've got FRQ number 1 pulled up now, and I switched the order just because this is the way you're going to see it on the actual exam. Notice I had 25 minutes plus 5 minutes to submit the last one. This one you're going to have, I believe, 20 minutes plus 5 to submit, so I've adjusted the time. Shouldn't be a huge deal. What's going on here? I've got the phrase class, which basically stores a string. Why do we have a class to store a string? Well, basically so we can do some methods on that. Looks like the constructor, you just pass in a string. Find nth occurrence. Okay, that says that if I pass in a string and an int n, that's going to return the index of the nth occurrence in that current phrase. So I guess the big trick with this one is what is the overall string we're dealing with here? It's this instance variable current phrase. Now this method's written for us. Where are we at? Yep, this method right here is written for us. And you guys actually had to write this on the Chapter 4 exam. I gave you the same class and made you write that method. Okay, and then we have two methods, replace nth occurrence and find last. I thought I fixed that. Last occurrence, I must not hit save. let's go through those. Okay, write the phrase method replace nth occurrence, which will replace the nth occurrence of the string stir with the string repel, as in replace. If the nth occurrence does not exist, current phrase remains unchanged. Okay, and there's several examples of this. Notice if I make my current phrase a cat ate late, and I go to replace the first occurrence of at with crane, we'll end up with rain, a crane ate late. Now if I go to replace the sixth occurrence of at with XX, nothing happens. If I replace the second occurrence of bat with XX, since there's no bat in here, nothing happens. And then there's just two other things that show me how that works. I'm going through those a little quick here, but there is nothing wrong with taking 5, even 10 minutes and just making sure you understand what they're asking you to do. I think that's the biggest issue with this, this set of questions this week, is just understanding what they ask you to do. Now, another big thing I want to point out, it says the phrase class includes the method find nth occurrence, which returns the nth occurrence of a given string. You must use find nth occurrence, it should say appropriately, to receive full credit. Okay, so in other words, they have a method for you that's going to make your method work easier, and you have to use it to get full credit. Okay, the biggest mistake I saw in this problem was students were basically trying to write that method, and it threw them off. It made them do other things. That'd basically be a question in itself. Like I said, I gave you writing that method on the Chapter 4 test months ago, and it took the whole hour to do it. Okay, so don't let that throw you off. If you have a notebook that you're using here, okay, that's something you want to keep track of, is make sure I'm using that method. Okay, so let's go ahead and write this. And I'm not worried about spelling because this doesn't need to be compile. They just need to be able to tell what I'm doing. Oops, I can't use tab. Don't use tab. And that's a nice thing about using an actual word processor. Just tab will do things for you, and then when you place it in, it'll be good. I guess I could probably be modeling that for you here. All right, let's go through this. Okay, so basically what we want to have happen is if the nth occurrence exists, we want to replace it. Okay, so if and if the nth occurrence exists, replace nth occurrence. And let's see, if not, we don't want anything to happen. So all I need with this one is a single if statement. Okay, and there's actually 5 points wrapped up in this simple chunk here. And I'm kind of breaking this down with comments just to show you how that you could do one part and not the other and still get a ton of points. So I'm going to do this out of order. Replace the nth occurrence. Okay, what does that mean? Well, in other words, what I want to do is I want to replace that nth occurrence in current phrase. So I want to say current is equal to, we're going to make a substring of current phrase. And I want to go from 0 to where the nth occurrence is. It'd be nice to have a variable for that. Let's say int index equals, now I want the nth occurrence where that string comes, where that string shows up, and that's where this method is going to come into play. So all I need to do is call find nth occurrence, okay, using the same string that was passed into this method and n that was passed into our method. And what that's going to do is it's going to spit out the index of that nth occurrence, -1 if it doesn't occur. Okay, So the reason I want that, that's going to make my substrings easier. I want to remove that nth occurrence. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the substring at the beginning of the sentence till we hit that nth occurrence. So from 0 to index. Then we'll say plus, we're going to put that replace string in there. And then plus, we want the rest of the string after the nth occurrence. So current phrase from index plus, let's see here, I don't want to include the string we're removing. So we'll do string.length. Yep, I think that's going to work. So I'm picking up after that string and then adding the rest of that to it. So here's everything before the nth occurrence of stir. Fixing that even though I don't need to. We're putting the replace there, and then we're adding in everything after the nth occurrence of stir. And again, I'm making this method out of order. I'm just kind of doing it the way I think about it here. And each of these chunks I get in, even if this is the only part I do, I get a point for it. Okay, so don't feel like it has to be some linear process. If you can never figure this conditional out, you can still get points for this, you can still get points for this, and maybe just lose a single point for that conditional. Okay, so here's what I want to do if the nth occurrence exists. Now let's go back and take care of that. If the nth occurrence exists, well, what does that mean? That means that it's in there. That means that that find nth occurrence would return something greater than -1, so I could type that in there. But another reason I already made this index variable. If index is greater than -1, okay, that means the nth occurrence exists, and then I'll do the replace here. Okay, so again, the reason I'm showing you things this way, even though it's maybe taking longer, is I want you to see here it's problem solving. Okay, when I open one of these up, I don't know how to go boom, boom, boom right in order. There's some thinking. Maybe I need additional variables. Maybe I do one part then the other. Okay, so don't feel like you have to do things in order. All right. Let's do the last one, write the phrase method find last occurrence. This method returns the index of the last occurrence of a given string in current phrase. Okay, if it's not found, it returns -1. So in other words, if this is our phrase, a cat ate late, find last occurrence of at would be at 11, because 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 would be where the last at shows up. Last occurrence of cat is just at 2. There's the only occurrence. Last occurrence of bat would be a -1, because bat doesn't exist in there. Again, take time to make sure you understand what they're asking for before we try to write the method. Okay, I've been talking to you guys a whole bunch, and I've still got 10 minutes left here. Okay, so don't race through that part to write the code that you don't even know what you're writing code for. Okay, so I'm going to write find last occurrence. I'm going to cheat, maybe. There's nothing wrong with copying, pasting, I suppose, on the actual exam. Okay, last occurrence. Okay, so let's think through this. I'm going to need something to keep track of my index. I think. What else am I going to need to do? I'm going to need something to count. I'm just going to say count. We'll say that equals 0. And I'm not sure if I'm going to need index. I'm thinking of how I can do this. That's what I'm trying to model for you. Again, maybe this is a bad idea. Maybe it's a great idea. We'll see. I know I'm going to need something to count the number of occurrences some string shows up in. I think I'm going to switch this count to 1, because the first thing I'm going to look for is the first occurrence. And then basically I want to keep checking as that count increases, as in, you know, the first occurrence, second occurrence, third occurrence. I want to keep seeing if there is that occurrence showing up. So I'm going to say while find nth occurrence of the string I'm passing in, comma, count, is greater than -1. Okay, so in other words, as the count goes up, as long as I'm finding that occurrence, I want to keep looping and keep counting up. Now notice this one. Again, you must use find nth occurrence appropriately to receive full credit. Now again, if you had to write that yourself into this method, yeah, you're not going to be able to do that in the 20 minutes, but it's given to me. So as long as there is a count occurrence of that string, I'm just going to add 1 to my count. I'm going to count up. So the next time I go through this loop, count will be 2, and we'll look for the second occurrence of the string, and then it'll be 3, then it'll be 4, and eventually we won't have those. And then what else do I need to do? I want to return an index. So yep, I'm going to need to reset this index. We'll say index equals find nth occurrence. I spelled that completely wrong. I'm going to lose the B. That just looks bad. I spelled it completely wrong. I'm going to leave it. I'm not worried about spelling here. Okay. Of stir comma space count will that work? That's not going to work. Let me tell you why, because I don't want to count up 1 yet. I want to reset my index first. Then change my count. Okay, so in other words, I'm going to start with a count 1. I'm going to continually loop through as long as the find nth occurrence of the string and count is greater than -1. If this loop runs, in other words, if I'm getting something less than -1, I'm going to reset my index and count up. At the end, I want to return index. And I suppose I need to start this as a -1, because if this never runs, if this loop never runs, in other words, if I'm looking at the case where find the last occurrence of bat isn't in this string, so I want to return a -1. So in other words, this loop won't run because find nth occurrence will return a -1. So I want that to be a -1 at the end there if that loop doesn't run. Okay, so hopefully that takes you through the thinking process, the problem-solving process a little bit. Again, I've done this problem already, and this is the process I went through. It's not something where the answer is just something you memorize and lay out. Okay, so hopefully that helped. Send questions if you got them. And even if whether you crush this problem, which you had some students do, or you struggle with it, same thing with the first question, as long as you're studying things, you're getting better, you're learning. Okay, make sure you're making notes of stuff you're missing. All right, I'll see you guys later.